Long before the sun touched the horizon, she found her refuge within Paddy, her horse, her only real sanctuary. The paddock was her temple of peace, mud caking her boots, the sweet scent of hay, and the silent understanding of an animal who demanded nothing but her presence, and she never failed to appear. On June 18th, 2021, she made that visit for the very last time. Gracie Elizabeth Spinks was 23 years old, a swimmer, an equestrian, a daughter, a sister, and a cherished friend. She was never supposed to be a victim, not until a system designed to keep her safe made the deliberate choice time and again to turn a blind eye. This is the chronicle of her life, and it is also the harrowing tale of every single warning sign that was tragically ignored. Are you prepared to confront the most chilling stories the United Kingdom has to tell? We're introducing our brand new book, Unreal True Crime British Edition. 35 shocking true murder cases that are guaranteed to hold you in suspense. You can get it now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle formats, or download your instant PDF copy directly from our website. Links are waiting in the description below. Don't let this one pass you by. Get your copy today, and now let us proceed with the case at hand. Gracie Spinks was born on October 19, 1997 in Chesterfield, Derbyshire. As the eldest child of Richard and Alison, she was raised with her brother Thomas and younger sister Abby in what her relatives called a vibrant and music-filled home. From her earliest years, those who knew Gracie consistently used the same descriptions: outgoing, self-reliant, and absolutely brimming with life. She excelled in both music and art. She mastered the piano all on her own. She loved to perform. She cultivated a massive circle of friends, the type of individual who drew people in not through effort, but by being so genuinely and completely herself. When Gracie was just a girl, her parents signed her up at the Dronfield Swimming School, but it quickly became more than a mere pastime. She earned every single badge, mastered each successive level, and ultimately returned to that same pool, not as a pupil, but as an instructor by the time she was a young adult. She had become a fully qualified swimming coach and a lifeguard, a person entrusted with the well-being of others. Yet her most profound passion was the one that galloped on four legs. She began her equestrian journey around the age of 11. What started as a casual interest soon blossomed into a serious commitment, and that dedication transformed into her entire way of life. She entered competitions. She collected rosettes. She adored a horse by the name of Amber, and then later another named Paddy, a gentle soul who became the centerpiece of her daily morning ritual, and that routine was sacred. Paddy had his stable at Blue Lodge Farm in Duckton, a short distance from Chesterfield. Every single day, often in the quietest hours before dawn, Gracie would be there. She would care for him, give him his feed, and take him for a ride. Her entire schedule was constructed around that time. It was the sort of simple, private happiness that gives a life its meaning. By 2020, Gracie had taken on another job to add to her full life. She started a new position at Expite, an e-commerce business headquartered in Chesterfield, taking a warehouse role to fund the lifestyle she cherished. She was 22 years old, working diligently, surrounded by friends, and building her future. She was precisely the type of young woman who had absolutely no cause to live in fear. His name was Michael Sellers. He was 35 years old. A supervisor at Expite, he was by all outward appearances completely unremarkable, quiet, timid, and extremely introverted, as his colleagues would later testify. He resided with his parents in Sheffield. Based on the evidence that was later reviewed at his inquest, he seemed to lack any close friends and had never been in a romantic relationship. The moment Gracie started at Expite, he took notice of her. According to the evidence summarized during the inquest, their messaging began in late 2020. They met up away from the workplace a small number of times for walks and other casual outings. Gracie's first impression, according to inquest testimony, was that he seemed kind and thoughtful. She had no reason at all to believe otherwise. She was simply being friendly to a colleague. He, however, was constructing a very different reality. In December of 2020, Sellers came to visit Gracie at her house. During this visit, as per the evidence presented at the inquest, he forcefully kissed her and physically pinned her down. She demanded that he get off of her on December 16th. 2020, she sent him a text message. She unequivocally cut things off. She informed him that she had no interest in a relationship. She was firm, clear, and perfectly within her rights to do so. For any normal person, that would have marked the absolute end of the story for Michael Sellers. It was merely the beginning of his. In the weeks that followed Gracie's text, Sellers made no attempt to move on. He started bombarding her with unwanted messages. He began to track her every move at Expite, exploiting the company's own CCTV system to keep an eye on her. He went to at least one of their coworkers and tried to recruit them to spy on his behalf, to relay information to him about her location and her activities. He was already observing her inside the workplace, and it wasn't long before he was watching her outside of it too. On January 4th, 2021, Gracie noticed a familiar car parked close to the field where Paddy was stabled. Sellers was sitting inside it. He had tracked her to her most intimate, most personal space, the one location on earth she went to feel at peace. She reported his behavior to Expite that very same month. The company treated her complaint with the utmost gravity. managers launched an internal inquiry and discovered what they later termed red flags all through the situation. When they confronted him, Sellers displayed zero comprehension of his actions and failed to show even a hint of remorse. The internal inquiry also brought to light proof of inappropriate conduct directed at 8 other women who either worked at or were associated with the company. 8 other women, the pattern of behavior that these women reported was chillingly consistent. A barrage of unwanted messages, women quitting their jobs just to get away from him appearing near their houses. He even hunted down one woman after she had changed both her home address and her vehicle to escape his obsessive attention, and he relentlessly pressured another for dates. This happened despite her constant rejections, and he used what looked to be a fake Instagram profile to keep tabs on still another woman. This was not some man who was struggling to handle rejection. This was a man who had a documented years-long history of fixation, relentless pursuit, and dangerous escalation. On January 27, 2021, Michael Surs was fired for gross misconduct, though the coroner's report would later place the event in February of that year. Losing his job meant he could no longer get to Gracie through work, so he devised other methods. In February 2021, Gracie Spinks dialed the 101 non-emergency line for Derbyshire Police. She explained that a man she used to work with had become, in her own words, obsessed with her. She informed the call handler that his conduct was getting progressively stranger. She voiced apprehension not just for herself, but that his actions might escalate, that it could happen to someone else, that things could get much worse. She was in every conceivable way an ideal person reporting a crime. She was perfectly clear, she was incredibly articulate. She offered context and incredible detail. She communicated a real fear of direction. Heading. She clarified to officers that she didn't want him arrested at that moment. She simply wanted his behavior officially recorded. 2 police sergeants who reviewed the call immediately saw the danger for what it was. They classified it as posing a genuine and immediate risk to her safety before the case was passed on. A constable then stunningly downgraded the threat from Sellers to low risk. He received what the record calls words of advice. Just a conversation with no formal interview under caution, no arrest, no risk assessment, and no safeguarding plan put in place. The body cam footage from the officer's visit to Sellers was never saved. X-Byte's disciplinary file, the very one documenting his harassment of 8 other women, was never requested. On February 18, 2021, the case was closed. Gracie Spinks was still breathing. She still had 4 months left. On the 6th of May, 2021, a citizen was walking near the field where Gracie stabled her horse. They spotted a bag of rucksack left purposefully on the ground near the paddock. They peeked inside. The bag held an arsenal of knives, an axe, a hammer, Viagra, and a note. The note contained just 3 words: "Don't lie." The person who found it was horrified. They were by all accounts completely shocked by what they'd seen. They did the sensible thing. They called the police officers arrived at the scene. They inspected the bag, and then they logged it merely as found property, not evidence of a potential threat, not a prompt for an investigation into who put it there and why, not a reason to connect it to the known stalking case of the young woman who kept her horse in that exact location. A case that was filed just weeks prior and had already been closed. The individual who discovered the bag was reportedly stunned by the utter apathy. They had presented police with a bag of weapons discovered near a known stalking victim's daily haunt, and the system treated it like a lost umbrella. That bag sat there for 43 days before Gracie was killed. 43 days inside, it was a receipt. That receipt was later traced directly back to Michael Surs. He had been there. He had placed it there. He had been getting ready. The morning of June 18th, 2021 began like every other in Gracie's daily routine. She left home early in the morning. She drove to Blue Lodge Farm in Duck Mountain. She went to tend to Patty. At 8:13 in the morning, other people arrived at the farm and found Gracie on the paddock ground. A man was witnessed running away from the area. Paramedics arrived to find she had catastrophic bleeding. She had been stabbed 10 times. A knife was discovered close to where she lay. The fatal blow was to her neck. It had sliced through an artery in her spine. At approximately 8:50 in the morning, Gracie Elizabeth Spinks was pronounced dead. She was 23 years old. Later that very morning, Michael Surs was discovered deceased nearby. A formal inquest later determined that he had died by suicide. The coroner in that inquest established that his actions on the morning of June 18th were anything but impulsive. They were meticulously planned and entirely premeditated. He had contemplated this. He had geared up for it. He had left a bag full of weapons by her horse's field weeks beforehand as part of that preparation. He had decided this was how her story would conclude. Because Surs died the same day he killed Gracie, there was never a murder trial. There was no courtroom where evidence was examined, no guilty verdict, and no sentencing. The formal public accounting of what occurred and why comes chiefly from the inquest held in late 2023 and from the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the IOPC. which probed Derbyshire Police's handling of the entire case. On November the 16th, 2023, a jury at Gracie's inquest came to a conclusion: unlawful killing. They found that Gracie Spinks had been unlawfully killed by a former work colleague. The jury was in legal language instructed that unlawful killing was the only possible conclusion based on the evidence. The IOPC's report was merciless. Investigators named 5 officers who had a case to answer for misconduct, 2 concerning the stalking investigation, 3 concerning the handling of the weapons bag. Among the specific failures detailed were no formal risk assessment. After Grace's report, no safeguarding plan and no background check run on sellers using the National Police Computer Database. There was no documented consideration of a stalking prevention order, no request to expedite for the disciplinary record showing his history with other women, and for the weapons bag. There was no treatment as evidentiary property, no cross-referencing with the open stalking case. The disciplinary result was from most suicides were stay happily unsatisfying is too many. The 2 officers involved in the stalking inquiry had the misconduct findings against them ultimately ruled as not proven. The 2 constables who terribly mishandled the weapons bag received mere written warnings. A supervising sergeant dodged accountability completely because he had already retired. Derbyshire Police did, however, admit that systemic change was required. By January 2024, the force had documented a new package of reforms, including mandatory stalking training for frontline staff. A new dedicated stalking coordinator improved risk assessment procedures, system upgrades to link relevant locations and case files, and a brand new policy specifically for found weapons. These were not small promises. They were the direct institutional legacy of what happened to Gracie Richard and Allison Spinks could have retreated. Many families do, and no one could possibly blame them. Instead, they stepped forward under the banner of Gracie's Law. The family launched a public campaign that called for mandatory stalking advocates for all victims, better training for police, and improved protections for those caught in the machinery of obsession that the system still failed to recognize and interrupt. A public demand for change, captured in a petition, soared past the 100,000 signatures required for parliamentary debate. Its final tally exceeded 105,000 names. The appeal had 2 key demands: to secure dedicated funding for victim stalking advocates and to mandate uniform enhancements in how police forces manage cases like Gracie's. The coroner's report on preventing future deaths, a formal document from the inquest, pointedly identified the lack of independent stalking advocates as a nationwide issue, not merely a problem in Derbyshire. Within that official record, the coroner highlighted systemic failures, inadequate risk evaluations, poor record keeping, and an inability to connect related locations in police databases, along with persistent inconsistencies in how discovered weapons were handled between different forces. Gracie was not allowed to become just another number. Her name was forged into law. Her death ignited a demand for reform. This is a technical analysis of the case. From a purely technical perspective, Gracie Spinks' case serves as a chillingly precise case study of institutional collapse at every single procedural stage. Every error compounded the one before it, and each squandered opportunity represented a lost chance to prevent the inevitable outcome. The initial point of failure involved the recategorization of risk. 2 senior sergeants had accurately flagged Gracie's report as a sign of immediate, tangible danger. That critical judgment was subsequently overruled by a junior constable who left no documented reason for the downgrade to a low-risk status. The entire purpose of risk assessment protocols in stalking situations is to counteract the fact that victims frequently downplay their own peril. An officer's job is to supersede that minimization with a structured evidence-based assessment. That crucial assessment never took place. The second point of failure was the gathering of evidence. The disciplinary file from Expite was at no point requested. That file held documented proof of Sellers' conduct toward 8 different women. This was evidence that would have drastically changed any competent risk evaluation. Neglecting to request it was not a small procedural oversight. It was the most critical intelligence failure in the entire investigation. The third point of failure concerned the bag of weapons. According to standard police protocols, a bag of weapons discovered near a location linked to an active stalking report should have been cataloged as potential evidence and cross-checked with all known open investigations. This did not happen. That oversight had a direct and fatal operational result. Sellers was not linked to the bag until after he had already killed, despite a receipt inside that tied him to its contents. The fourth point of failure was the failure to use any protective legal measures. In UK law, a stalking prevention order is a tool that can be sought even without a criminal conviction. It is the exact type of instrument created for circumstances where criminal evidence is not yet sufficient for a prosecution, but a clear pattern of dangerous behavior has been established. No record shows any officer ever considered or even noted the possibility of using his son to see this option. As the coroner stated, it was simply absent. These errors taken together do not point to one officer's mistake, but to a systemic breakdown of stalking-specific competence through many layers of a police department. Psychological analysis. Any thorough review of this case must also confront the behavioral psychology at play, not to make excuses for it, but to comprehend it well enough to spot it sooner. The behavioral patterns Sellers exhibited are a textbook match for what threat assessment experts term unwanted pursuit behavior following rejection. All the classic warning signs are well documented. A refusal to acknowledge a direct and clear rejection, escalating efforts to reinitiate communication across various platforms, and surveillance of the victim's regular locations, as well as proxy recruitment, which involves asking others to watch or provide information about the victim, and crucially, a complete inability to stop, even when faced with formal consequences, like being fired from a job. What makes the Sellers case so particularly revealing is the documented history of previous victims. 8 different women over several years had been the target of his obsessive behavior at various levels of severity. Each prior target was both a red flag and because of the lack of any official intervention a practice run. The women who quit their jobs, moved homes, and changed their cars. They were the ones who adapted. He adapted right along with them. The system never once stepped in. The inquest evidence portrayed him as a man with no close friends and no previous romantic history. This is not a formal psychiatric finding and should not be interpreted as such, but it does indicate a recorded pattern of a person who constructed entire imagined relationships around women who showed him basic professional kindness and who then met any boundary with escalation instead of acceptance. The premeditated aspect of the murder, which the coroner confirmed during the inquest, is extremely important from a risk assessment viewpoint. The weapons bag discovered 43 days before the murder shows that his shift from obsession to lethal planning was anything but sudden. There was a preparation stage that spanned multiple weeks. That phase occurred during a time when Sellers had already been terminated from his employment, had already been contacted by the police, and had already been flagged by several institutional figures as a person of concern. He was not hiding from the system. The system saw him, and then it chose to look away. We must be perfectly clear about what transpired and when. October 1997. Gracie Spinks was born in Chesterfield, Derbyshire. In 2020, Gracie started her job at Expite. Michael Sellers was already a supervisor working there. In late 2020, Sellers and Gracie messaged each other and met up outside of work on a few occasions. December 2020. While visiting her home, Sellers physically overstepped a boundary. Gracie told him to get off. On December 16th, she sent him a text message cutting off all communication and clarifying she did not want a relationship. January 4th, 2021. Gracie spotted Sellers' car parked close to Patty's field. She reported him to her employer, Expite. The company initiated an inquiry uncovering proof of his unacceptable conduct towards 8 other female employees and fired Sellers for gross misconduct. February 2021, Gracie contacted the Derbyshire police. She reported being stalked. The first responders on the scene recognized an active and urgent threat, but a constable later downgraded the suspect's danger level to minimal concern. He was given a simple warning, nothing more, no formal questioning, no evaluation of the danger he posed, no background check, and no one even bothered to pull his file. The case was dismissed on February 18th. Then on May 6th of 2021, a citizen stumbled upon a rucksack in Patty's field holding knives and axe, a hammer, Viagra, and a terrifying note that simply said, "Don't lie." Police just recorded it as found items and did nothing else of substance. On the morning of June 18th, 2021, Gracie Spinks made her way to Blue Lodge Farm in Duckminton to care for her beloved horse. Her body was found at 8:13 a.m. Brutally attacked with 10 separate stab wounds, she succumbed to her injuries by 8:50 a.m. That very same morning, Michael Sears was also discovered deceased not far away on November 16th, 2023. An inquest jury reached a verdict of unlawful killing. The coroner released a damning report to prevent future tragedies, highlighting critical nationwide flaws in the system. In January of 2024, Derbyshire Police officially outlined a number of organizational changes following the coroner's findings, a new movement. Gracie's Law now carries her name into the future, fighting for a world that addresses stalking with urgency before it's too late. Gracie Spinks followed every single rule. She rejected him, she went to the police, and she provided the authorities with all the evidence they required to prevent the inevitable. This catastrophe was not her fault. In any way, she was a vibrant young woman, a swimmer, an equestrian, a beloved daughter, and a cherished sister. Every day began before sunrise for her, caring for her horse, Patty. She even spent her time teaching kids how to swim. Her life was full of laughter, with friends, deep love for her family, and concrete dreams for her future. A future that was stolen even though the system had every tool and all the necessary information. They had plenty of time to act, yet at every single opportunity they chose to do nothing. And if this story affects you, please do not let that emotion fade into silence. Pass this story on, lend your name to the petition for Gracie's Law, and if you or anyone in your life is dealing with a stalker or obsessive behavior, contact the National Stalking Helpline immediately, because the support that failed Gracie has to be available for the very next person who needs it. In life, we often move so quickly that we forget to pause and truly see what matters. The story reminds us that behind every ordinary moment lies a deeper meaning, one that calls for empathy, patience, and understanding. It teaches us that people are not always what they seem on the surface. Everyone carries unseen struggles, silent battles, and untold stories. What makes us human is not perfection, but the way we choose to treat one another. A small act of kindness, a moment of listening, or even a simple gesture can change someone's entire day or even their life. We don't always realize the impact of our words and actions, but they ripple farther than we imagine. This lesson encourages us to slow down to be present and to lead with compassion. Instead of judging quickly, we should seek to understand. Instead of turning away, we should reach out. Because in the end, what truly defines us is not what we achieve, but how we make others feel. And sometimes the smallest kindness becomes the greatest legacy we leave behind.